Brotato may just be one of the most unique roguelikes you've ever played. Scrolling through the Xbox Game Pass, I saw this random game about a very hostile looking potato, and to be honest, it piqued my interest. Initially, I didn't know what to think. I've heard of Brotato before from a friend of mine a while ago, but it being a roguelike kind of drifted me away from it. Until recently, I wasn't the biggest fan of roguelikes because I never understood playing a game without a cinematic story. However, with recent disappointments, some of which we've even covered on this channel, I found it appropriate to try a new game type. My editor Ethan is a big fan of roguelikes and I thought it'd be fun to give them a try for the channel. That's when I was instantly hooked. As soon as I started playing, it clicked to me why so many people hold this genre up there as one of the greatest. I played so many runs of so many different games that I was starting to become genuinely addicted, slowly making progress in games like Hades, Slay the Spire, and Vampire Survivors. I wanted to try every single one of them. But to do that, I had to go back to the game that made this discovery possible in the first place. I find it kind of ironic that the first ever roguelike I played that got me into the genre was one that was trying to be more of a parody than a roguelike. I think everyone finds out new things that they love through different means, but I feel like roguelike enjoyers usually come from games like The Binding of Isaac or Spelunky. Not a game about a potato with guns. But you won't find me complaining. Actually, what you'll find is me using the next 8 minutes to describe to you why I fell in love with Brotato, and why I think you will too. When you first open Brotato, depending on the kind of person you are, you'll feel a few different emotions right off the bat. If you're anything like me, you will instantly look at the menus that you shouldn't look at and overwhelm yourself before even starting the game. This has genuinely turned me away from even starting a few new games, as I didn't feel like I would ever be able to comprehend all of the UIs that the game has given me all at once. Even if they didn't give it to me all at once, and I wasn't even supposed to look at it. You see, I tried doing that for Brotato, but to no avail, as I was met with a single wall of achievements that seemed like things I would accomplish by just playing the game. This is a fantastic way of the game hiding its inner complexities while still giving the players the opportunity to discover more about them. It turns out, this was more than just a great wall of achievements. This was the main way to unlock new characters, which essentially introduced entirely new builds into the game. Had I known this from launch, I wouldn't have even touched it. But I didn't, so I started up a game with the basic well-rounded character and just ran around for a bit. Now, if you've played any roguelike on a modified 2D scale or any bullet hells, then you're going to be very familiar with the way the map of Brotato looks. It's a square. That's pretty much it. Not usually the type of game I would go for, but I was playing it. It was slow and repetitive at first, and I would have never told you before this that I would enjoy this experience, but I was still playing it. On my first ever run, I was able to make it to wave 14, and I was pretty happy with it. I know that it's probably very low in comparison to your own personal best, but I was satisfied with what I was able to do on my first run. But then, I accidentally clicked new run instead of the main menu. I was going to stop. I had some scripting to do for another video and only wanted to scout out what this game was about. But the game had already started, and I couldn't just leave now, could I? Not after this little Brotato worked so hard for me. Not after learning of his true potential as an axe-wielding murderer. In a few words, yes, I could. Very easily. Just pausing and leaving. But I didn't. So I played again, and again, and again, and then again. For hours on end. Honestly, I wasn't quite sure of what was happening. I started playing around 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and now it was almost 10 or 11 p.m. I was thinking to myself that I have to work the next day, I need to stop, yet I just couldn't. I pressed on, slowly accomplishing more and more achievements which revealed to me new characters with their own nuanced playstyles. Playstyles that you can actually take seriously. Okay, let's take a quick break to talk about the importance of characterization in video games. The NPCs should have some semblance of life in them. Enough to give the illusion that they're not just there for the player's enjoyment. And on the other hand, the player characters should feel like a moldable form dependent on the playstyle of the player. For many games, however, it doesn't really feel this way. Typically, they'll get the NPCs right, but the player character feels like a pre-programmed archetype that the player just has to follow along with. This technique may be great for story-heavy games, but when it comes to RPGs, don't you want your player to be whoever they want? Don't you want to give the player dozens of options for them to decide from? Anyway, Brotato gives you dozens of options of which kind of character you want to play. An element that many AAA games fail to meet nowadays was masterfully done by this $5 potato shooter. Because while all the characters aren't anything too game-breakingly different, they all have their own perks and make it feel like you're doing a completely separate run every time. Take the King for example, who wants to upgrade his weapons as soon as possible to get his tier 4 weapons buff, while simultaneously avoiding getting new tier 1 weapons which apply a debuff instead. The game even accommodates this character by giving them a tier 2 weapon to start instead of a tier 1, as to not have to start with that debuff. Or maybe you want to give the Mutant a try, where you gain triple XP from getting kills on the battlefield, but due to your freakishly good looks, shops will be 50% expensive. It's probably all those extra eyes that did it, or that weird forked tongue. Hell, maybe you want to divert expectations and play an Artificer who immediately starts with 100% less damage but loves to see things go boom. Great, now I have to call my landlord to get that fixed. The choice is always yours, and the game always feels fresh due to the abundance of weapons and items you can obtain through the game's shop system, which is where Brotato really shows its strengths. Brotato has two main ways of progressing once you've started a run. Using the coins you picked up from your murdering spree to buy new items and weapons which can be stacked or upgraded, or reaping the souls of the monsters you've ravaged and absorbing their experience to become a stronger, possibly more delicious, potato. The first avenue we're going to look at is the traditional shop, but it has a unique aspect that's typically only seen in roguelikes where you can have weapons and items. I went over why these are important in another video, but you may be asking, what the hell's the difference? And let me tell you, because it's a pretty big one. Items are typically more expensive and have a less drastic immediate effect, but are unlimited in your inventory and are always applied to the round. This means that you can have as many items or as many duplicates of those items as you want. At least, I've personally never hit a cap for them, which means that at the very least you can get more than a dozen. Then there's the weapons, which depending on the type of character you're playing can be maxed out at either 6 or 12. Weapons are a little bit different from items because they can be sold and replaced. Buying weapons of the same type does not automatically upgrade them, as your Brotato will equip both of them, but you do have the option of combining them to increase the quality of the weapon you're using. This feature can be applied to every weapon in the game, and it isn't always just upgrade on sight. Some characters might like having 2 white SMGs instead of 1 blue one, as it allows for them to have more on-hit effects. It's this sort of fast-paced decision making that changes with every run that keeps the gameplay so fun. Not to mention that every time you equip a new weapon, you can see your character wielding it out in the field. This also applies for a large amount of items in the games, like any wigs or costumes that you might pick up. But what about the other form of progression we talked about? Well, that would be your level, which is incorporated in a way that many players will be extremely familiar with. 1. Kill bad guys. 2. Get more XP. 3. Get higher level. However, the game doesn't just give you flat upgrades to damage or health every time you level up. Instead, it'll give you the choice between 4 parts of your body, or potato, I should say, that you can choose to upgrade. This can be upgrading your back to have more armor, or upgrading your forearms to deal more melee damage. From what I can tell, these don't have a visual effect on the character themselves, but the flavor text is always nice to have. The game also includes other features of roguelikes like boss fights and an endless mode, but that's more standard for these types of games. The last thing I want to talk about is the unique way that Brotato removes a major problem in this sort of game: pacifism. So the gameplay loop of Brotato is a lot like the late stages of zombies in Call of Duty. Horde the enemies up, run around in a circle, and blast any enemies that get too close or that block off your escape while you slowly whittle down the crowd. However, Brotato has a built-in way to prevent this from being the only method you use to approach this madness. At the end of the round, all the coins that are left on the field will be collected, but they aren't added to your inventory. The first time I saw this, I thought that I'd be able to spend them, and was extremely confused when I found out that I wasn't able to. But I very quickly learned what was up. Instead, the amount of extra coins that the game collects for you at the end of every round is used as a counter for the next round. That counter is how many of your coin pickups for this round will be doubled. That's right, for every coin that you didn't pick up last round, the game will double pickups in this one. Meaning you didn't lose those coins for not picking them up in the last round, but you will lose them if you don't go out of your way to pick up the coins that have dropped now. This system honestly had me in awe. Such a cool, small thing that many people wouldn't even consider adding to a game like this, but it solves one of the most crucial issues that this game could run into. Instead of finding a meta way of playing it and only sticking to that, players simply have to experiment with what's gonna work. Sure, you could say that this feature incentivizes a meta of running straight into the horde, but try that in Call of Duty and let me know how it goes for you. Wow, we're at the end of the video already? I could honestly talk about how much I enjoyed this experience for hours, but neither one of us have that sort of time, so let's just leave it here for now. Brotato was honestly such a breath of fresh air for me, and I can't wait to play more games like it. And hopefully, I can call them business expenses since I'm playing them to make videos on them. Let me know if you have any recommendations down below, and don't forget to subscribe. Ooh, I almost forgot. I've seen a few of these videos and some of them have a list of the games they've talked about ranked in order of enjoyment, and I thought that was a cool idea, so I'm gonna steal it for my own. Sure, it isn't the most original thing that I could do, but what is nowadays? However, I will not be grandfathering in the previous games I've talked about, at least not yet, because thinking about some of those games gives me a massive migraine. So, as it stands right now, Brotato is the best game that has ever been created, and that's a definitive fact that no one can argue with.